welcome back to Salmon's Pizzeria. It's the first weekend of the championship season. It's just gone by, and it's great to be back. Unfortunately, it is just me and Enzo this week. Enzo, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm not bad. I'm not bad. I'm wearing my that ridiculous away top that we brought a few years ago, the one that has a green dot for every win, an orange dot for every draw, and a red dot for every loss that we've had in the league up until the point that it was released. So it's just covered primarily in red, obviously. But it was quite a big seller at the time, and I haven't worn it in a while. So I thought, why not stick it on tonight? But yes, I'm all right. An interesting weekend around the division, I would say. Obviously, the two of us were at the same game, so we'll probably have a bit more emphasis on that one. But there's probably quite a few things to talk about, I would say.
I definitely, and I believe the shirt that you have, I believe that one came out 2019-20. It feels like it was when you were in League Two.
It was, yeah, we wore it in League Two and then
Yeah,
League One.
Simon Murray was at the team.
Yes,
I
yeah,
remember Simon Murray wearing it, so
yep.
in the announcement. So I'm glad I can remember something. But yes, it has been an interesting first week back. I suppose we should probably. I want to start off with some off the pitch news, and that is to do with the cooperation agreements. We have seen two clubs in the champion. Well, one officially confirmed before it came out before the Friday night game that United had got a deal with Celtic. Very unsurprising when you consider who is in charge. Although weirdly enough, Air already had one, but with East Stirlingshire. So it was a case of Celtic can send up to 3 under 21 Scottish players to Ayr United, and they can just move between the clubs at any time.
That's
And
right.
then the same thing for Ayr players going between themselves and East Stirlingshire. And the other update, I suppose, would be with the links between Reef Rovers and Rangers. On Thursday night, an email went out to those who have season tickets and Club 1883 members, and it was a case of it was all laid out. It was like, here's what Robson wants to say about it. Here's what the board. Here's what John Potter says about it. Our technical director. Here's what the board say about it. And that the vote for that got announced on Monday night, with it being revealed that 85% of fans had voted for it. Well, at the time when it first got announced as cooperation agreement, and there's these rumors about Rangers, I was against it mainly because I was against the idea of the cooperation agreement. Enzo, you guys were linked with Celtic at first. Actually, what are your
Yeah,
thoughts on this?
I believe we did discuss it with Celtic from what I've heard, but ultimately they chose to go with Ayr. I mean, there's a whole host of reasons why they might have done that. I think, do you know what? Like from my perspective, I don't love it, to be honest with you. But from a Queens Park perspective, my thought was, look, we don't have a significant amount of money. We probably can't be turning away three signings, even if they don't end up being that great, just to flesh out the squad a wee bit. So from that perspective, I was a wee bit disappointed that ultimately that didn't go through. But I do feel as though I don't know. I mean, I understand that a lot of the logic behind the flexibility, because last season obviously we had Dane Murray on loan from Celtic and he was fantastic. And he got pulled back in January because they needed him to tick a box for European competition in their squad in Europe. So I suppose this system allows them to potentially do that whilst not removing him entirely from the team that the player's on loan to. Dane Murray's just an example. I don't believe he's actually eligible for it given his age now. But with guys like Bonner and Ure, who I think are two of the guys that have got through it, they could potentially use them in that way. That means they can have them for the homegrown player rule in Europe. So um, I can see the benefit to that flexibility. I believe there's also a weird sort of caveat in the rules that if the players haven't played X number of minutes by March, I think it is, they won't be eligible to play the final games in the league campaign, which is a bit odd. But there's certainly something like that in the rules. So if you've got three guys and they haven't been playing football, then they won't be eligible to play something like the last 10 games of the season. I don't really understand the logic behind that. I suppose it's potentially putting a wee bit of pressure on the lower league, the partner club to use the guys, which was one of my fears about it. But as far as I'm aware, you have full autonomy over who they are. If you want to take the players that you're offered, you can say no. Um, my only minor concern, I suppose, is that I think we're on a bit of a slippery slope towards things like B teams and stuff in the league, and I think they are quite desperate to try and shoehorn that into the system one way or another. So anything that even tilts the balance slightly in that direction, I don't love. But I just, like I say, you can't really be knocking back free talent.
Yeah, I believe it's like one of the reasons for it was the fact that there would be players who would be like 18, 19 or whatever, but it's like the clubs, Premiership clubs and that weren't willing to let these players go out on loan
Yeah,
just because of the fact they would be like second or third choice options.
yeah,
And so if an injury crisis came along, they'd end up being the ones called up. And so I do understand where this is coming from. And then again, as you mentioned about that boy you had from Celtic, where it was a case of box ticking for UEFA of the homegrown quotas, I
yeah,
believe that the Scottish leagues need to have their own homegrown quotas at this point, just because of the fact like I made a video last year and it was about how like the Scottish Premiership was absolutely horrendous when it came to young Scottish players
yeah,
getting minutes. Like it was on par with England when it came to being as reliant on foreign talent as it was. So I do understand the meaning behind this, but again, like as you said about like this sort of obsession with B teams or whatever. I believe it's like when it came to it's like not long after the cooperation agreement was announced, we were immediately linked with Rangers, and I think a lot of people at the time were like, "We don't want to be Rangers B,"
yeah. And I
and
think there's just
I
that.
suppose it's like after the League Cup group stage, it's very. I feel like the tone very quickly changed when I was just like, actually, we could use this for squad depth.
Yeah, and I get the just the general apprehension with being associated with either side of the old firm. I get that concern for fans of clubs like Wraith, Dunfermline, or Queens Park, whoever it might be, because it can potentially be problematic. But I think they have tried to design a system that's beneficial for that has benefits. Maybe beneficial is too strong a term, but has benefits for both parties. I suppose there are still drawbacks as well. But at the end of the day, it doesn't mean that you can't still have access to the standard loans, the standard loan pool from other clubs as well. Um, it'll be
Yeah, it's like these
interesting.
ones are separate. It's like they don't
Yeah,
come on. It's like I believe the current rule is 6 players in on loan from
yeah,
SPFL clubs, and it's like these. I believe it's like now plus 3
yeah,
who are part of the cooperation agreement. So
yeah.
you
Because
can
the
have technically 9 players in on loan. You can nearly build an entire
yeah,
squad of loanees.
yeah, well, I think we tried to do that in the last half of last season, to be fair. But I think because the key difference with this and a regular loanee is that the parent club retains their registration even when they're playing for. So if you've got a guy on loan from Rangers, he will still be registered as a Rangers player even when he's playing for Wraith on a Saturday. So yeah, I'll be interested to see how long. I'll be interested to see how long this lasts. I don't know what the sort of long term viability of this is, or whether it potentially gets a little bit, whether it kind of grows arms and legs from here. I'm curious to see how it develops. Definitely.
Also, with the European aspect, I'm kind of curious as to what UEFA will be like when it comes to, as you say, it's like these players still being registered with Rangers, Celtic, etc., but then playing every week at another club in the pyramid. It'll be interesting to see if like ends up running into something there with
Yeah.
these teams.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of who was it that scored for Rangers against Panathinaikos. I can't even
Uh,
mind his name, but it's like if he comes to Reef for whatever reason, and then Rangers want to bring him back for like a European game midweek, but then UEFA come out and say, "No, you can't do that," then it's
I'm not
gonna
sure.
gonna cause a mess.
I don't know because I think they cited because if you remember that when they announced that this system was being put into place, they cited several other examples of leagues in Europe where they have something similar. I can't recall which countries they were, but I would imagine the fact that Rangers do retain their registration would mean that there's it wouldn't surprise me, to be fair, if it turned out that the SPFL, SFA, whoever condoned this overall, just hadn't really thought about it, and there is in fact going to be some massive stumbling block when it comes to that. But that would be very, very on
It
brand.
would be
I suppose
very
we'll see.
SFA. It'd be very
Yeah,
SFA if they went through all of this effort and it's like it gets to UEFA and it's just like, hold on a minute.
yeah,
Be very typical of them. But yes, as mentioned, the Air agreement came out before their game on Friday, which is the first game of the season under the lights. It's Arbroath's flag day against Scott Brown's Air Celtic. That's a new name now with this agreement. It's no longer Scott Brown's Air United, it's Scott Brown's Air Celtic. That's what. So this one started off interesting as Jamie Murphy. A ball would come in from a corner, it would get knocked down to him on the edge of the box, and it's a really good hit, really nice finish. And 5 minutes in, Ayr take the lead. But as we were saying in our preseason predictions about how it's like we expected Arbroath to be 10th, 9th, down that way at the end of the season, like in a bit of a relegation scrap, and Ayr would be someone who would be at the top end, that's like potentially fighting for a title. It did not seem like that at all.
No. I think. I mean, when Ayr score 5 minutes into the game, you are sort of thinking, right, this is going to be a bit of a massacre potentially. And I think probably for the first maybe 9 or 10 minutes, they were quite heavily on top. But after that, I have to say, given how much a lot of people sort of bigged up here, including myself, based on the signings and the standard of the squad that they've got, they were very, very disappointing. I don't know because I obviously given his the fact that he was a former Queens Park captain, played for us for a couple of years. I had one eye on Dom Thomas in that first half, and I think he was actually hooked at half time. Just they lacked any real creativity when they were trying to break forward. It was not at all what I was anticipating from that fixture.
Yeah, and it's like Arbroath came very close a couple of times in that first half to equalising. Probably the closest would be when ball got whipped into the box and Ryan Dow just headed just wide just before half time. But second half as well, it just went the same way.
Yeah,
It's like it was just. Granted, I didn't watch the game in full. I was only able to watch the highlights that the SPFL put up earlier. But it just seemed like it was all all Arbroath, sorry, and it was like there was Riley running onto a long ball over the top, and he struck it straight at Mitchell, which again was really close to being an equaliser. And it's like Arbroath would get their equaliser, and of all people, it was Nikolai Todorov.
yes,
after after I'd slagged them off in both my preseason video and the preseason podcast, which is quite funny, if anything, because going into the previous season where he signed for Aki's, I had praised him as a signing
and now you've done the opposite.
because because of the fact it's like he'd scored like a good few goals for Airdrie in their first season up, and granted, I probably think like half of them were against us, but it's like he'd proven himself to be he has a somewhat proven goal scorer at this level, and then at Aki's he scored once in 32, and so I was
Yeah,
like, well, he's not going to do much. He scored one in one.
yeah, but that doesn't mean he's going to score 36 goals in the league this season.
He's not
I
going to go 36, but if he imagine if he does stick with like one, if he does
yeah.
finish the season with one goal, and he's just done this to spite me.
I think what I said in the preview podcast was that he'll be a solid enough signing, but he probably won't over the course of the full campaign get more than about 5 or 6 goals. And despite the fact that he's got off to a good start, I think I probably still maintain that opinion. I still don't think he's going to be absolutely prolific. Now, a striker that scores you 5 or 6 goals is absolutely fine if you've got other guys in the team, creative midfielders and wingers and whatever, who will also be scoring regularly. I think one of the concerns I had about Arbroath was that might not necessarily be the case, but I was surprised by the standard of performance that they put in. I think they looked like they. I mean, if you were to ask somebody which of those two teams, somebody who maybe doesn't know too much about the league or the sides that we're playing in general, if you were to ask somebody which of those two teams do you think was more likely to be competing at the top end of the table, they would probably have said Arbroath realistically, and I don't think Ayr can feel too aggrieved at the result. The only thing I think I would be a little bit aggrieved about, I suppose, if I were an Ayr fan, and I think again this is something else that we touched on in the preview podcast, I think Mitchell should be doing better for that goal. I don't think he covers himself in glory there at all. But I think there is always the expectation that he's not going to stand up to it as well as he probably should.
Yeah, he did sort of like scramble across and
Yeah,
just sort of fall over.
yeah, pretty much. Yeah, Yeah,
But yeah, it's like as you said, it definitely looked as if like the expectations for reverse for this game is like I believe it's like with the SPFL highlights, the goal that Air scored with Jamie Murphy. It was the only highlight that Air
there
had,
you
and
go.
it's like
Yeah,
I had a look after I had a look at the stats. Air had 3 shots, and Murphy's goal was the only one on target. Arbroath had 11.
yeah. There you
They had
go.
11 shots and 4 on target. It was
Exactly what I mean. Yeah, that's it's not at all what anybody. I mean, that would have. I tell you what, I'm not much of a gambler, but that would have burst a lot of coupons on Friday night before the main card of fixtures had even started the next day.
yeah, very much so. And I'd imagine for Arbroath fans, it was a good time considering. I mean, it's always a good time when you get like a last minute goal or whatever just to avoid defeat. But they'd be really happy with that performance anyway. Even if it did finish 1-0 to Air, I think Arbroath fans would be happy with that performance. It's like I know obviously it's like you would have lost, but it's like you could have been like, okay, you can see something there. You've
Yeah,
got something that proves that you can compete at this level, and evidently they can.
yeah,
I still have a feeling they will finish bottom, but it won't be like what it was like the last time they were in the division. I believe the last time they only got just over 20 points, and I reckon they'll usually teams in relegation, if there's an actual relegation scrap, the team that finishes bottom has about 35 points
yeah, yep,
on average, roughly. It's like that 35 to 40 point area is where you'll get team scrapping.
yeah.
So
Last
I
season,
think I'll both will be in that range this season. So it'll be interesting to see how they do for the rest of the season. So of course we had a pretty exciting opening game, which meant on the Saturday we move on to Morton against Dunfermline.
yeah, I had a feeling that'd be a pretty low scoring affair. I didn't think it would have no goals. To be fair, I was kind of predicting maybe a one each or something like that. But by all accounts, and I know there's not too much to go off because neither of us was actually in attendance, obviously. But by all accounts, the first half was pretty even, but Dunfermline did really take the game to them in the second half, and they might have felt as though they should have stolen a goal at some point. I believe the Morton goalkeeper, who we had a bit of a conversation about last week, is it Storer, the boy that they got
Yeah, from the boy on
from
loan
Wolves?
from Wolves.
Yeah, apparently he had a pretty good game and he's looked pretty decent for them so far, and that's going to be really key to their progression and their performances this season, given how important Ryan Mullen's been for them over the past couple of years. So they'll be pleased. They'll be pleased that he seems to have stepped up quite well so far. Um, but yeah, Dunfermline, that I suppose the potential concern or frustration, if I were a Dunfermline fan, is one of the issues that they really had last season was scoring goals, especially when Chris Kane wasn't in the lineup. They basically couldn't if he wasn't there at all. And if this season started off similarly, I know they'd scored a few goals in some of the League Cup games, I suppose. But if this season started off similarly, I might potentially have some worries that could be a persistent issue again.
Yeah, that was something I pointed out where it's a case of Dunfermline were just really, really bad at going forward last
Yeah,
season. I didn't believe they'd fix it, and this game, for the most part, proved it. I believe it's both goalkeepers did make a couple of good saves, but outside of that, there wasn't much beyond half chances,
yeah.
and it was really a very typical Morton versus Dunfermline game. I think I made this joke like twice last season, where it'd just be like, now it's Morton against Dunfermline. Moving on, it was just it's fully expected. I was not surprised to see that Morton against Dunfermline finish 0-0, and because I have no life and I was very hungover on the Sunday morning, um, I decided to go through all of the fixtures from Saturday,
Okay.
like every single fixture in Scotland that I could find, and it was only this was the only one in the top 5 tiers that finished 0-0. The only other game
Really?
was
Wow.
Bowness Athletic against Haddington in the East of Scotland Premier. That was the only other 0-0 on Saturday throughout all the divisions that
Well, I
played. So
suppose there's potentially two ways of looking at it. They're the only two teams that didn't score a goal, but they're also the only game where both teams kept a clean sheet. So I suppose that's I suppose they're not the only teams to have kept a clean sheet though. So it's only against each other now. There's not really.
boring.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. But I think probably Morton, when it comes to their attacking prowess and what they expect to have going forward, they they're obviously pinning their hopes on. Adeloy and now Brophy as well, who they've brought in. I don't think either of them played on Saturday, did they? Because Adeloy still didn't have much of a
Um,
pre-season.
no, I think Adeloy started
Oh, did he
actually.
start? Right, okay, I might have misread the lineup. Okay, fair enough.
I'm,
No, you're
I'm
right. Adeloy did start. Adeloy did start. You're right. Yep. Okay, well in that case, maybe he. I don't know. Maybe he's just not that good. I don't believe that. I think Tommy Adeloy is the kind of striker that will get goals at this division if you can keep him fit, though. But like I was saying, he didn't have much of a pre-season, so maybe he just needs to get up to speed a wee bit.
Yeah, it's like as you say with Morton keeping clean sheets. Aiden made sure that I would mention this that Storer in his 4 games has kept 3 clean sheets,
Yeah, and that's
which
impressive. Yeah,
pretty impressive. Impressive start to life at the ton for him. But from a game with no goals to a game with plenty of goals. Unfortunately, we don't have Cal or Kieran here. Don't worry, they're just busy. Kieran hasn't gone off the rails and committed a murder suicide against Cal. That's just
as far as we
not
know.
happened. They're fine. They have messaged in the group chat. But yeah. So this one where it's like it was a case of Thistle have aspirations to be in the playoffs, and Johnstone obviously have aspirations to win the league.
Yep.
And if you want to test yourself against championship opposition, then Partick Thistle are a perfect team to start off against, in my
Yeah,
opinion. Because, like I said, I believe they would finish fifth. But it started off with Patrick Redding giving Thistle a lead 15 minutes in. It's, it was a nice bit of skill down the play, just like a back heel to, I believe, Logan Chalmers, who just whipped it across the box. Redding was there to head it home.
yeah.
And this seemed to anger St Johnston.
Yeah, and I think it was funny because you saw from some of the highlights that the Thistle fans having a great time at that point. They're thinking, right, we beat Ross County in the final game in the League Cup, and we've come to Perth, and we've started really well here. Hold on, maybe Mark Wilson's got something. Maybe we've really got something this season. Our expectations should be much higher than a lot of us anticipated, but it certainly wasn't to be on Saturday.
No, it really just did not go well after that, did it? Jamie Gullen, 2 minutes afterwards, he'd end up through and going, but just blast it past Budenaukas from close range. Just before the half-hour mark, Josh McPeak would get his first goal with a really nice finish, curled it right into the bottom right corner from the edge of the box, and then second half. No, it was still the first half actually. McPeak would score again before half time, where it was a weird one. It was like a ball came across the goal, but it's like it hit Budenaukas, it hit a Thistle defender, it hit the post, and then it hit McPeak and went in. It was just a very clumsy goal,
Yeah, yeah.
but and
I
then
I was just going to
uh,
say, I think the first goal, and I think we're only 3-1 at this point in terms of the discussion, but the first goal that McPake scored, very reminiscent of, there was a game at Firhill, I think 3 years ago, where we beat Thistle 4-0, and McPake scored his only ever 2 goals for Queen's Park, and both of them were identical to that, where he cut inside and shot from the edge of the box. So it was funny for me to see that because I never particularly rated James McPake, Josh McPake. Sorry, I'm getting my McPakes mixed up. But by all accounts, he's kind of upped his game a wee bit and his attitude has improved and maybe he's matured slightly off the park and that's all factored into what's been a fantastic start to the season for him on Saturday. I would never ever have expected that just from having watched them play for us for a year.
yeah, Josh McPeak and James McPeak are a bit different.
A little bit, a little bit.
A little bit different. I rate Josh McPeak higher than James. We'll just put it
It
that way.
depends. It depends on what you're trying to do. If you want them to manage your team and get them relegated, then
I would probably.
maybe.
Oh yeah, if you want a team to get relegated, yeah, I'd put James McPeak in. But yeah, it's like as you were saying about how his first goal was a bit of a carbon copy of those 2 he scored for Queens Park. It
Yep.
was like the goal that he scored to get his hat trick was basically a
Again,
carbon copy,
the
but just
same.
at the other end of the pitch.
Yeah, yeah. He was a bit of a one-trick pony for us, and it looks as though that trick is still very much in his repertoire.
It seems he's possibly perfected it. Maybe it's just a one-off thing. If your experience with McPeak is anything to go by, but yeah, it's just hat trick on the opening day, best thing you could possibly ask
Yeah,
for someone.
and I think I mean it's we could quite easily hear focus on the fact that Thistle defensively were really poor. They didn't, and that surprised me actually because I thought one of Thistle's strengths this season is that they'd be really tough to break down and they would make it difficult for teams to score. And as I say, we could potentially focus on that, but actually, I think the right thing to do is to highlight the fact that St Johnstone were just brilliant. They just looked they played some fantastic football, and if they can maintain that for the majority of this season, even County are going to struggle to keep up with them.
Yeah, it was just a complete performance
Yeah,
from St Johnstone, and Stevie Malin would get his first goal with a really nice free kick as well. And
yeah,
like to open the season with a 5-1 win is definitely a statement of intent. You know,
yeah. And I think if that had been a 5-1 win against ourselves or both Airdrie potentially, it might not have turned so many heads. But the fact that they did it against a team like Thistle, who really should be kind of up there scrapping at least for fourth place, is really really impressive.
yeah, it was just like Thistle haven't exactly had a result go against them like that for a good wee while. So this
Yeah.
is definitely is like going into it. I expected St Johnston to win, but not like that. You know, it
No.
was just like it's like when it's like getting like occasional updates, like just checking phones, just checking the scores and just seeing it's five. just I just yeah, definitely a statement of intent. Definitely shows the level that St Johnstone are looking to play at. And as you say, it's like if we play like this throughout the season, and it's like Simo didn't exactly get the opportunity in the Premiership
No.
to properly implement his style because obviously it's like you came through mid-season, you're going to have to work with what you can, and
Yeah.
you only got the January window, and it's like January is a bit more limited. You're not going to have free agents. You're going to have clubs not wanting to. It's like clubs will inflate prices for players, that sort of thing. So now he's been given a summer to implement his ideas. He's got a full preseason. He's got his a squad that he wants, and if this is what they're like, it's going to be terrifying for the rest of us.
Yeah, I fear that may be the case. Yeah, there are I think, especially the teams at the lower end of the table could take some serious beatings off of them. I know that 5-1 is a bit of a serious beating, but potentially even worse than that. And in terms of Valakari, I think it almost felt to me in the latter stages of last season that he was already preparing for life in the championship and how he wanted his team to set up in the style of football. And obviously, you're going to struggle against tougher opposition, and mentally, it's a bit more difficult to get your players up for it when I know that there were points where they looked as though they might have potentially caught 11th place, but it was never all that realistic. So just getting the players up for it and stuff's a wee bit more difficult. But the intent, I think, to build a team that could play this way in games, especially where they're going to have so much more of the ball, which they are going to have this season. Uh, that's something that didn't just start in the summer. There, it's something that started probably when he initially joined St Johnstone, and they're really kind of seeing the fruits of that labour now.
It will be interesting to see because it has been a case of teams coming up from a championship because usually they've won the league. I don't think we've had a team win the league and then come straight back down. So, and as we saw with Dundee United last season, they came up and finished. they came up and finished fourth. So it will be interesting to see what. I don't want to like claim they've won the league already after game week one, but it's like with the way. But it's like if they go on like this and they play the way they're doing and they get results like this, it will be interesting to see what a first season in the Premiership will look like. A first full season in the Premiership for Seymour will look like.
Yeah, well, I mean, we can have that conversation, I suppose, in 6 or 7 months' time. But I agree with you that I think it's probably even fair to suggest that they're the favourites for the title at this point. Again, we're one game into the season, so a lot could change. They play County on Friday night on TV. Everybody will get the opportunity to watch that, and if they actually County are maybe a bit more of a stuffy, more. I mean, they should have been stuffy. We'll get on to the Airdrie County game shortly, but a bit more of a stuffy, pragmatic team in theory, and you wouldn't expect St Johnstone to be able to tear them apart quite so easily. Although I believe St Johnstone did actually score 3 goals up in Dingwall multiple times last season, so I'm really, really looking forward to that fixture because that will give us a bit of an insight into how the two of them compare. Because it's all well and good seen St Johnstone play against Wraith and County potentially struggling. Sorry, St Johnstone against Thistle and County struggled against Thistle. But put them against each other and we'll see how they fare.
I do remember Carl saying that I think in all 4 games, St Johnstone had the better of County last
Yeah.
season. That's what he believed. I mean, he's a Saints fan. He's going to say that, but it was a case of there were moments. I think it's like the only times he dropped point. I think there was one where it's like Josh Ray made a mistake or whatever, and that cost him 3 points up in Dingwall, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, fair enough.
So, but yeah, speaking of Ross County, they started off their season away against Airdrie, where it's a case of a team who stayed up through the playoffs coming up against a team who came down through the playoffs.
Yep.
Obviously, different playoffs would be weird. But yeah, it started off with Akil Wright scoring with a header from a corner in the 19th minute. For the rest of the first half, Airdrie were quite unlucky not to grab an equaliser, I would say. There was definitely a good few chances for them, and there was this weird stramash where they had about like 5 or 6 attempts, but nothing really came of it. Second half, however, it starts off. So it's like Akil Wright scores again, but the thing is, it's like it came from a corner, which started from a free kick, which seemed to come from an Airdrie player getting fouled.
All right. Okay. Yeah.
it was like
Classic.
it was
Classic.
like a Ross County player from behind sort of seemed to like foul an Airdrie player who
Yeah.
then fell into a county player
Yeah. It's
and
the
it got given as a county free
Yeah,
kick.
it's the butterfly effect of Scottish officiating going the wrong way, I suppose, where one or two decisions later, and all of a sudden you've cost a goal from a relatively innocuous mistake. So yeah, that's obviously going to be frustrating for the from an Airdrie perspective. Although ultimately, the game didn't turn out that way. Spoiler alert for anybody who doesn't know what the result was there. But yeah, when I was following along with the scores when County went 2 up, I thought, right, that should be safe. Surely you would expect Ross County playing against Airdrie. They go 2 goals up in the second half. You're thinking, that's it. You don't even think you wouldn't even think to check that score again until full time, probably. So the fact that that didn't happen by all accounts, based on the, I mean, I've seen the goals, and the fact that again, I'm going to ruin it for anybody, but obviously Airdrie get 2 back and it ends up finishing 2 each. The county goals I thought were really bad goals to concede for a team that I expected to be really defensively solid this season. I was surprised at how, I mean, not easy maybe isn't giving Airdrie the credit that they deserve, but I was surprised at how easily that Airdrie were able to get 2 back.
Yeah, it was definitely one that it's like as you said, it's like when you see that Ross County went 2-0 up, it's a case of well, that's that sorted then.
Yeah.
Apparently not, because it's like the first goal that Airdrie got. Um, it starts off with a new rule that IFAB have brought in. IFAB being the International Football Association Board, they're the ones who make all the new rules for FIFA and whatnot. And this new rule is that if a goalkeeper holds a ball for more than 8 seconds,
Yeah.
a corner is given. And so obviously, Edge will get given a corner. They take it quickly. It goes to the edge of the box, and then someone gets fouled. But yeah, and then Ewan Henderson. That's the second goal I'm talking about. But I've just realised. But yeah, it's like Ewan Henderson would score the free kick. That's the 74th minute to get the equaliser. But the first goal was just Ross County just being asleep.
Yeah. Yeah, it
It was,
was
it was just asleep. It's
unbelievable.
like, even though they had a defensive line that was at the 18-yard line from when the pass is played, and somehow Ewan Henderson was able to get behind and slot home.
Yeah, it just wasn't good enough. I would have been furious about that if I were a County fan. It's just given there's a lot of experience in that back line, guys who you would expect to be very, very competent defenders at this level of football, and that would have really, really, really pissed me off.
Yeah, it's like I remember from looking at the highlights. I think it was like one of the boys just went forward, and it just opened up this huge gap.
basic
football to be
mistakes,
played into.
basic mistakes that you wouldn't expect guys with the experience that they have to be making, and it's just it's something that I think the kind of sloppiness with both of these goals, because we'll talk. I think the corner as well. They didn't close them down well enough. They had the opportunities to close them down. We're kind of combining both Airdrie goals into one here, but the sloppiness to me kind of reflects a team that doesn't look particularly up for it or particularly motivated, and that falls on to Don Cowie, I think, to not be setting his team up well, not be giving his guys that sense of confidence. Like he should be instilling confidence in this team, and I just don't think he's got the charisma or the character to get the best out of a squad that I still think on paper is more than capable of winning this division. If they play like that, if they concede more goals like that, they're going to be struggling to finish in the top four. Never mind win. Never mind compete with St Johnstone for automatic promotion.
Yeah, it definitely took a page up the old Reef Rovers book of going 2 goals up and then still finding a way to not win. It's like we had a shocking record for that, by the way, going 2 goals up. It was awful. But yeah, it doesn't help when it's like, as we saw with St Johnstone, they just kept on going. Whereas that didn't really seem to happen with Ross County.
Yeah,
It just turned into a case of, right, with 2 goals up, let's just do whatever it takes to try and protect this lead. And from what I could see, that just turned into battering
yeah,
Chris Mockery.
and and the thing is that's probably not a horrific strategy. You can at times get away with that, especially when you're on the road, the first game of the season. Um, it's a reasonably warm day and stuff. You probably can get away with that. However, if you attempt it and fail, then that is unacceptable. It's as straightforward as that.
Yeah, it was just did not work. Whatever they tried.
No,
Like I said, it's like the battering of Chris Mockery. It's like Gallagher got a booking, and then in the second half, he again clatters Mockery, and there were goals for a red card from the Airdrie support for a second booking. I don't
it could have been
entirely think
given.
if he wasn't on a booking beforehand, he would have got booked, but I don't.
Yeah,
But it's one of those. But yeah, Doherty just absolutely flies into him and gets himself a booking as well. That just seemed to be the tactic at that point. Just Chris Mockery is one of Edgery's main attacking threats.
yeah, yeah.
He's a
Especially
very good
this
midfielder.
Especially
And
this season, now that they've lost a couple of their other, he's kind of had to. I think the expectation is on him to, because at times last season, I think they probably didn't see the best of Mockery, but I think the expectation is that he's going to have to step up this season, given some of the other players that they've lost. And by all accounts, on Saturday, especially in the second half, he did do that.
yeah, but yeah, it's like Edgery coming back to get themselves a point is pretty good. You know, it's like we
Yeah,
obviously had our doubts about them going into this season. I know I've got them finishing like I think seventh,
I've
but
still got my
I
doubts
do
about.
believe there's like a sort of they're going to, as mentioned about our both about that sort of 35 to 40 gap. It's like this idea that our Airdrie is like with the players that they lost, they'll probably be in and around about that band, maybe like just above it. But yeah, to get a result against Ross County, who many people have got tipped for winning the league, being up there at the end of the season is pretty good
It's a great
for them.
start. Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure I mean, I would imagine there aren't many Airdrie fans out there that wouldn't have bitten your hand off for a draw on Saturday before the game started, and certainly when they went 2-0 down.
Aye, absolutely. And to end us off and to continue the trend for how this weekend has gone, it is, of course, Reef against Queen's Park with their draw. Obviously, we were both at this game, but Queens opened the game with an early penalty, 10 minutes in. Michael Roof sent Josh Ray the wrong way. See, when it came to watching that, it's like I didn't because I'm in the south stand, like right at the back of the south stand. I didn't know what happened at the other end, aside from it being a penalty. It's like I wasn't
Yep.
able to see what it was, and it was like when it came to watching the highlights, and the first time around, I was like, "What's he giving a penalty for?" And then it's like watching it back again with like the slow motion replay and then a second replay from another angle. You can see, I'm not entirely sure what the Queen's player's name is, but it's
It
like
was Roddy
Scott Brown
McGregor.
has just gone to. It's like
Yeah,
he's
it
swung
was.
his leg back to go clear it, and it's like as he's about to connect with it, it's like the Queen's player just nicks it.
Yeah.
and of course that sends him down.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
one of those where it's really frustrating when you see that your team's conceded it.
Do you know the funny thing is, and I don't know if I can't even remember if the highlights picked this up, but see, even after Roddy McGregor went down, I can't recall who it was, but one of the Queen's forwards actually puts the ball in the net anyway. So even if he hadn't given the penalty,
Yeah,
we
yeah,
might have got
I
the goal.
noticed
So like
that.
what? Like surely at that point, can you not play advantage if they've put the ball in the net when the alternative is a penalty? I'm not sure what the thought process was there. If we had missed that penalty, I would have probably been quite annoyed about that. But that wasn't to be in the end. But yeah, I think McGregor kind of slips in at pace. Brown, it's not intentional. It's not in any way intentional. I don't think he has any idea what he's doing, but he does kick him.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to. He does kick him, and
Yeah,
like
it's one of
you
those ways, like, if it happens to your player what happened to Scott Brown, you'd be furious about it being
yeah,
given, but it's like, if it was the other way around, I'd be screaming for that to be a penalty.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
one of those.
And it's again, I know this is a bit of a cliche, but if that happens anywhere else in the park, you're never saying it's not a foul. It's as straightforward as that. I know that there are different standards for penalties, and there probably shouldn't be, but if that happens in the halfway line, nobody is debating whether it's a foul. I don't think so.
Yeah, it's like, as you say, it's just like the ball ended up in the back of the net like 2 seconds later anyway, but I think the referee blew the whistle immediately,
Yeah, he did. Yeah,
and
yeah.
so it was before the shot got away, so
He
obviously.
did have a good he did have a good view of it to be fair from where he was standing, and then I wasn't sure actually. My expectation was that Josh Fowler would take the penalty. However, he did miss a penalty in a pre-season game against Albion Rovers, so I guess him and Michael Ruth maybe have an agreement that they'll maybe take turns, or I don't know. I can't remember if I said this on the podcast last week, but Michael Ruth and Josh Fowler are actually best mates and like away from football as well, which is an interesting situation to be in when you've both rocked up at the same club in the same pre-season. So if they've got that good relationship, then it probably makes it easier for him to say, "Do you know what? I'm taking this one."
Yeah, it's like after that, it just became a slog, to put it nicely. It was pretty much Rafe being camped in Queen's Park's third, but just not being able to get anything clear cut. There was a point where a ball came in and Vaughan hit the post, but yeah, it did seem to be a case of, it's like we know the situation with Queen's Park, and it was almost as if the Queens got that goal, and it was just like, right, park the bus, 9 men behind the ball.
Yeah, I think actually I think in the first half after we scored, I think we did make attempts to break forward. I just think we struggled with it. But I agree that in the second half we absolutely were like, let's cling on to this for everything with everything that we've got. I think there because if you recall in the first half, Josh Fowler had a really decent chance as well. He takes the shot at Ray's near post, which I know he's famously maybe not quite as comfortable defending as well, and Ray kind of palms it back into the box. So
Yeah, like
I
help
think
Ray,
we
help like Ray's arm, like,
yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I don't think there was any intent for us to just defend the lead in the first half, but I do think that became the case after halftime.
yeah, it's like second half was very much that way. I think, if I remember correctly, Queen's Park ended up in our third once, and that was at about
Probably.
the 65th minute.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, that sounds just about right.
Is like that second half, it was just a constant barrage, and it got to the point where Sean Byrne had a shot.
Yeah.
It's like, I've seen, this is Sean's third season now at the Rovers, and I genuinely think that is the first time he had a shot. Like
Well, he didn't score
it's
though,
very much
so
it's very much a thing with Rovers fans where it's just like, have we ever seen Sean Byrne take a shot? I don't even know if he scored a professional goal.
yeah,
It's just like he would never shoot it. It would always be a case of he'd be in like it's like last season there was times where he'd be in the perfect position to have an attempt at goal, and he'd just pass it sideways or something. And
yeah,
it was always really annoying. So it was just like, when we'd seen him take that shot, we were just like, did we just see that?
yeah. I think though, for all the possession that Wraith had and all the time that the ball spent in our third, and I think you would agree with this, Callum. Wraith never really troubled Callum Ferry. I think he had one actual save to make in the entire 90 minutes. Obviously, the penalty itself doesn't count. We'll come on to talk about the Wraith penalty in the second half. But for all that we were camped back, I do feel as though at centre half in particular, Matty Shields and Charlie Fox, they dealt with everything brilliantly. You know, they cleared their lines great. They won just about everything in the air, and And I'm so used to going to Starks Park and seeing Calferi pull off 2, 3, 4 absolute world class saves. It's a venue that has a tremendous track record of playing out of his skin at, but he really didn't have to do that on Saturday.
Yeah, it was a case of it's like at one point, my dad messaged me asking how the game was going, and I just said to him, "It's all Rafe, but I just don't see us scoring."
Yeah.
It was only ever getting to like half chances. Always like if we did get a shot away, it would just be blocked. We had like some. There was something daft where it's like we had like so many shots. I think we had 10 corners. So we had 10 corners in
Yep.
that game.
And I think most
Um,
of them probably came after Chin came off the bench because he did start to kind of work us down the wings a little bit, and he was putting good balls in that we were getting a little bit less comfortable with and having to put behind a wee bit here and there. I think I would be curious to see how many of those corners came after he came on because he looked really sharp when he came off the bench.
yeah, it's like we definitely looked sharper when Chin came off the bench. It was a case. He's one that I can see being not one who'll start as much as I
Uh-huh.
want him to because I think he's great. I love him already. But he's he's one who's just got that pace,
Yep.
tenacity, that whole sort of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, right. It's like you bring him on 70, like 65, 70 minutes into a game, he's just going to cause chaos, and
Yeah.
that proved to be the case where um, him just like constantly going at your right back, your right side, eventually led to a corner, and then like a whole bunch of stuff happened, and then
Yep.
of course there was the penalty. Now at the time you were saying it was quite soft, and watching back and seeing it was a handball, and it's really unfortunate. It's just one of those really unfortunate ones where it's like it's like the boy's arm is down, but because he's jumping and moving forward, his like left arm is like it's just dragged behind him and it's hit his arm, which it is a penalty. Again, it's really unfortunate, but
I'm going to have to disagree with you on that one. I don't think I'm surprised to hear you say that, to be honest, because I've spoken to another couple of Wraith fans, and most of them have agreed with me in that it wasn't a penalty. There's actually a really interesting angle where it looks as though the ball hits off his ribs rather than his arm. Again, you're really getting into the nitpicking at that point in the detail that we don't realistically have access to because it's the championship and there's basically one camera following everything. I felt quite sorry for McDonald when he gave that penalty away, though. I think part of the reason why it was given was that like just prior to the ball, the cross coming in, his hand was kind of flailing out a little bit, but then he does get it in on time, and it's one of these ones for me where it's like, what is he supposed to do with his hand? What's he supposed to do with his arm there? Because it's just, I don't know. I'm gonna have to. I feel quite strongly that that wasn't a penalty. However, I'm not overly frustrated with it because ultimately I'm quite happy with the point. I'm not, I'm not going to be complaining too much about the point then. But I don't see that. I don't see that. I can't see the justification for that being a
yeah, it's
penalty,
like
if I'm honest.
uh, as as I said earlier, I think it's like both of these penalties were ones where you conceding, you'd be furious, but you not getting, you'd also be furious. It just it was just one of those games where it's like if this game had finished 0-0 and like we didn't have these two penalty incidents, we would have nothing to talk about,
That's it. That's exactly it. Yeah, it's like
and
it
we would
wasn't.
be like, it's fair enough. Or even if like as I was saying, it was like with it being mostly if it had finished 1-0, it probably would have been fair enough as well. But it's like with it being like these two contentious penalties,
Yeah,
that
I think it's worth. I mean, obviously, as I said earlier on, rated a lot more of the ball than us. That's just blatantly the case. But they didn't. I know that rated something like 18 shots, and we had like 8, I think, or something like that. But both teams had 4 shots on goal as well at the end of the day, and that's not particularly. I mean, that probably says a lot about it. 4 shots on goal each over the course of full 90 minutes. It's
I think with the shots on target thing, I think it's just because of the fact that half our shots got blocked.
probably, yeah, yeah, and
So
that's
it
a
didn't get
testament
counted
to
as
how.
shots on
Testament,
target.
yeah, it's a testament to how well we I think we did defend really well. I know that
Yeah, I'm
you
not going to
maybe
take that away from you. This
from
is a
from
really
it
good
could
job.
it could be from a Wraith perspective, you feel as though that you maybe didn't attack particularly well, and obviously we have our biases when it comes to watching a game, and we're more analytical and more kind of concerned with how our own team's fare, and that's totally reasonable. But I think what's really important from a Queens Park perspective is that we there's two things for me. So we, over the past couple of years, have been an absolute nightmare for chucking games away late on, especially against Wraith. Actually, we've done it a few times against Wraith in particular, but chucking games away against pretty much everyone in the division, especially when we concede one goal. It's almost a case of right, we're definitely going to concede. Like if we're one up, we concede one. It's like okay, we're going to lose this game in the last 5 minutes. We didn't do that, so that shows a degree of development in the sort of mentality of the defense and the players in general. Um, and honestly, just with the sheer amount of pressure that we were under last season, I feel quite confident in saying that we would have lost that game 4 or 5-1. So the fact that we managed to hold out for a
Again,
draw is a big improvement. It's a big improvement.
yeah, it's just like Jack Hamilton become close, but as usual,
Yeah,
Ferry would pull a save out.
that was the one
Yeah,
real
that was
save
like the
Ferry had to
one
make.
save that he
Yeah,
really had to make,
yeah,
which, as you say, it's like considering previous trips to Starks where it would be like 5 or 6 or
yeah.
something absolutely ridiculous like
I mean,
that.
even the 4-0 game last season, when it was 1-0, Cal Ferry, before we got our second, pulled off two
Oh yeah, it was like a
legitimately
free
world
kick where he
class
just
saves.
pulled up an absolute worldie of a save, and
Yeah,
you're
it was
just like,
ridiculous.
well,
Yeah, it's just ridiculous, and he is capable of doing that, thankfully.
it is like it's a one thing with like Queens Park when playing against them where it's just like it's like in your head like going into it, it's like Rovers fans are just like we're gonna absolutely battle them, but it's like we'll not win because Callum Ferry will turn into God between
Yeah,
the sticks basically
pretty
because
much.
again he just does it all the time and it's really annoying
He
and
does it all the time.
it's why I always wax lyrical about him on this podcast, and it's because having seen him however many times now, it's always been a case of he just pulls off save after save after save, and he's. But
Against
then, of course,
against
it's like the
Wraith.
one game that we play against his last season where he doesn't play, we go and beat his 5-1.
Yeah, that's true. We played a 17-year-old in goal that night, to
Yeah.
be fair. And I don't think he gave a bad account of himself, all things considered. But yeah, it was a bit of a step up for the boy.
But yeah, that's all the games that we've gone through. With 4 of the games being draws, the table is really easy to read out because it is St Johnstone top on 3 points. Um, Everyone else on 1 point apart from Thistle, who's at bottom on nothing. um, Although, of course, Airdrie and Ross County have their 2 goals, so they're second and third, and Dunfermline and Greenock are 8th and ninth because they had a stalemate against each other, but at this point it doesn't really matter. I've got no idea how they organise it when it's like this.
Goals
When it's
for
like, how do they decide if two teams are on like the same amount of goal difference? Like, what's like the fourth step? I wouldn't.
alphabetical order.
Well, it's not that because Queens Park are ahead of Ayr and we're ahead of Arbroath, and it's like we're sitting fourth, which I'll happily take. Just end the season
Stop
now.
the count, Donald Trump
I
style.
stop the count. That's it. We're in the playoffs. That's all. That's all good. But
Honestly,
yeah.
I would probably take that as well right now, to be fair.
Aye, absolutely. I mean, actually, hold on. Who's in the relegation playoffs? Oh, it's Morton. I was going to say if it was. Actually, I predicted Dunfermline 8. So again, I would happily take that because that means I've got something great. But as mentioned, we do have to look forward to next week's. Well, this coming week's fixtures, where the Friday night game is arguably the big one of this early stage of the
Huge.
season, Ross County against St Johnston.
Yep.
That's the one where, as mentioned, with like St Johnston's style of play against Ross County's style of play, to see is this St Johnston team going to do what they did against
Yeah.
Bristol again? Do they have the potential to just run away with this title in a style? It's like when Hearts came down and it was Hearts, Rangers, and Hibs. People would have expected, like this really tight three-way title battle. Hearts just robbed the league. I think they finished with like 92 points, nearly 20
Right, yeah.
points clear, 21 points clear, or something like that,
Teams.
of
They
Rangers
scored.
and
Yeah, they
nearly
were.
30 clear of Hibs. So if St Johnston do what he did to Thistle against Ross County, then just end the season. Just like
Well,
go, this you're done. Fine, just
I
go up. We'll just put the gold bar on top of the screen. You're
that's it.
done. We'll just
Game
ignore you for
over.
the rest of the season.
I think if St Johnstone hammer County, or at least beat them very comfortably on Friday night, I think Don Cowie could get the bullet. I think he could be out of work by Monday morning.
That is certainly.
And I think
Uh,
most county fans would probably want it at this stage as well if that happened.
yeah, I think I'd seen carry out stuff after full time already
Doesn't
against
surprise me.
Adria. It's like, I know it's the first game of the season, but I have first-hand experience of someone getting sacked in the first league game of the season.
Well, that's true, but I suppose with Wraith, the issues stemmed from his replacement, and then having to replace him as well when it came to Ian Murray, because ultimately Robson did well when he eventually did come in the latter
Yeah, it
stages of
was
last season.
just that first half of last season was just a right laugh.
It was.
but but yeah, Ross County against St Johnstone Friday night game that'll be on the BBC. Your Saturday games: Partick Thistle at home to Greenock Morton, which is always a tasty fixture. Ayr are at home to Rafe. I will be there. I like going to Ayr away in the summer, if it's anything like, well, maybe not the last few days with this storm, but if it's sunny and like 18, 20 degrees, then Ayr away is a good day out. Queen's Park, these are at home to Arbroath, and Dunfermline are at home to Airdrie. You looking forward to Arbroath visiting Lesser Hamden?
Um, I never really look forward to going to Lesser Hamden, if I'm honest with you, because I just don't
Okay, yeah,
particularly
that's a
like
good
it as
player.
a venue. But I am looking forward to the game. Yeah, I think given that both teams had to kind of grind out a tough draw on, I was going to say on Saturday, but obviously are both played on Friday night. Given that both teams had to really grind out a draw at the weekend and both achieved that, and I think it's a fixture that ourselves and our growth will be looking at and going, okay, this is an opportunity to get our first 3 points on the board this season. But I really feel as though the pressure's on us a wee bit more because when you're the home side, it's your first home game of the season. It's your opportunity to kind of set a standard and show other clubs that it's going to be difficult to travel there and play against you. So we'll see how it goes. But it's going to be a really difficult game either way. I wouldn't. I don't know how to predict it at this stage.
Yeah, it might also be the only game of this season where there won't be much of a debacle about tickets, and
Oh, I
might
think
be
it's.
possible.
I'm pretty sure it's already almost sold out. So
Wait, is it already sold out?
I don't think it's sold out, but there's maybe like 100 tickets left between the home and away sections.
Trace, I remember making the joke about these selling out against Livingston, but
I will be amazed if there are any league games this season that don't sell out. Maybe if we end up playing against like a Broth or potentially Airdrie on a horrible Tuesday night in January or something like that, there might be some empty seats. But I think the vast majority of them will sell out, and there would have been demand for more, especially in the away section for the bigger travelling sports. But yes, this is again a topic that I could sit and talk to you about for hours on end, Callum.
so yeah, I guess we'll see you next week to talk through all those games, and bye for now.
Cheers.